Hey, thank you. So I'm Sarah Doyle. I work for the BLM in the Spokane district, which manages public lands in Washington State, and we're part of the Oregon-Washington state office. And so this talk today is about the Benton City Pit, which is a sand, gravel, and basalt operation near the Tri-Cities in central Washington. This has actually been the first competitive sale from an Oregon-Washington district in a long time. So um, I'll talk about the location of the pit and the geology, and then move into the BLM's mineral materials program and the competitive sale process a little bit, and then specific to this project, the NEPA and mine plan considerations, and then our ongoing work. And then I have a few takeaways for future similar actions. So the Benton City pit is within Benton City, which is west of the Tri-Cities. This is Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, Washington. It's about 2.5 hours from our office in Spokane Valley, Washington. This map in the upper right is the project area. So it's a single BLM parcel surrounded by private land to the south and state managed land to the north. Horse Heaven Hills is a popular recreation area that's BLM managed nearby. So here's an aerial image showing the BLM parcel with a private pit just to the southeast, and they're actually the applicant and operator of the Benton City pit. And then Horse Heaven Hills on the other side of Badger Coulee or Badger Canyon here. And the Yakima River to the northeast of or northwest of the pit. So here's a couple photos looking south towards Horse Heaven Hills from the mine site, and then from standing on top of Horse Heaven Hills looking down into the valley. So you can see the basalt at the top of Horse Heaven Hills here. And then I do have a photo point that can look down at the pit at different time periods. So this is another view showing from one year to the next operations going on at the Benton City pit. And behind it, there's another ridge of basalt. And so that brings us to the geology. The Pasco Basin, which is where the pit is, has a thick layer of Columbia River basalts. So these were lava flows that erupted about 17 to 6 million years ago and filled in the Columbia Basin. In the area of the Tri-Cities, about 2.5 miles thick of basalts. And tectonic forces have created kind of east-west trending anticlines and synclines, and the Horse Heaven Hills is one of these. Let's see if I have a pointer. Don't know if I do. See that. But you can see the Horse Heaven Hills trend near that red star for the Benton City pit. The Columbia River crosses that Horse Heaven Hills trend at Wallula Gap, which is where the Columbia River Gorge, the steep basalt cliffs start. Right. So this is a screenshot of Google Earth with our BLM managed lands from Washington overlaying on it. Kind of describe our BLM managed lands as scattered tracts, especially in the Columbia Basin. And so this next section, I'll just kind of go through some Ice Age flood geology. I'm not an expert, but during the last Ice Age, the Cordilleran ice sheet dammed the Clark Fork River, where it enters what is now Lake Pend Oreille in northern Idaho, creating Lake Missoula. The ice dam would form and then catastrophically fail multiple times, and the lake would empty, releasing a lot of water, a ridiculous amount of water, and the floodwaters would travel at up to 80 miles per hour, eroding whatever material was in their path. They traveled down to the Spokane River channel and then across the Columbia Basin, spilling out into a lot of small drainages that became wider and now have undersized streams, and we call these coulees, and these make up the channeled scablands. And a lot of our BLM land is actually within those channeled scablands, so a lot of basalt. And nearby, there's a lot of the Palouse Loess, that is the prime farmland. And then the floodwaters all kind of came back together in the Pasco Basin and tried to funnel through the Wallula Gap in order to get out into the Columbia River Gorge, past Portland, and into the Pacific Ocean. So more information on that in Bruce Bjornstad's book here. Here's a zoom in on Tri-Cities, showing Wallula Gap, Horseheaven Hills, and where the Benton City Pit is with the red star. So when all that floodwater was trying to get through, it actually dammed back, or couldn't get through at the same time as a pinch point at Wallula Gap. So we had a lot of floodwaters stalled in Lake Lewis, which was a temporary lake, and probably formed for a week at a time. Got up to about 800 feet thick or deep, and a lot of those floodwaters would travel back up river drainages, such as the Yakima River drainage here. Here's a picture of Wallula Gap looking south. Anyone not familiar with the area? So again, the red star is the Benton City Pit. Actually, think that the Badger Canyon or Badger Coulee was the old Yakima River channel that would meet with the Columbia River upstream of Wallula Gap. And because of Lake Lewis and all the floodwaters, it has now been filled with flood deposits, and the Yakima River channel had to reroute its course up and around to get back to the Columbia River. And so here is a figure from a hydrogeologic study of the area, just showing that specifically within Badger Canyon or Badger Coulee there, the flood deposit gravel specifically are probably around 100 feet thick. So here's a picture of the Benton City Pit high wall, showing all the gravel deposits. So the Hanford Formation is the name given to the flood deposits in this area. And the older deposits are the gravel dominated, very thick gravel deposits. You can see some large scale cross bedding here. And as you move up section, you get to some more sand dominated layers, and the colors change as you get more basalt rich. And then at the very top, you have the slack water deposits, which would have been from Lake Lewis. And then we have Holocene windblown loess on the top there. At the base of the high wall here, there's actually a wavy unconformity with the Columbia River basalts. So throughout the pit, the operators have been finding basalt at different layers, and it's kind of made things interesting for them as they mine. Here's another photo of the pit, and I try to enhance the contrast to show the color differences. Just the sand lens in the middle of the gravels there, and then getting up to more basalt-rich sands near the top. And so the material from this pit is being used for concrete and asphalt, depending on what material they're mining at the time. So here's another photo showing the basalt at the base of the high wall here, and they're definitely blasting in some areas to try to use that basalt as well. Okay, here's a picture of the overburden. The operator calls the overburden. It's the slack water deposits, and in this picture specifically, you can see some clastic injection dikes that would have formed at the end of the Ice Age floods, and then the windblown loess on top. So another interesting feature, some erratics, ice-rafted erratics were found at the site, and these were all along the edge of Lake Lewis. So I have some photos here. Our realty specialist with some of the boulders. Okay, so all of that to say that this project area parcel actually has a great mineral material resource, and the BLM can sell material like this because of the Mineral Materials Act of 1947. We can dispose of common variety minerals such as sand and gravel, and the funds from these sales goes to the U.S. Treasury. The discretionary actions and the regulations around them are 43 CFR 3600. And today I'll specifically talk about exclusive sales, which is the 3602 regulations. All right, so I mentioned that this was a competitive sale, and we have competitive sales and non-competitive or negotiated sales in the BLM. And the real difference here is that the competitive sales are bid on, and they really are default in the BLM, because with a competitive sale, you can determine the true value of the material. And this is done, through oil or sealed bidding, starting at the fair market value of the material, and to ensure that you won't undercut nearby competition as well. Some of the perks of a competitive sale, you can have longer term contracts, 10 years versus 5 years for a non-competitive, and they're renewable. So if there's more material, you can have multiple contracts in the future to the successful bidder. And there's no volume limitations. So Benton City Pit, our first contract was 750,000 cubic yards, which is well over the limit for a non-competitive sale. Okay, so I just put out some of the steps here for the Benton City Pit specifically. We received a request for material in December of 2020 for the 750,000 cubic yards. BLM reviews any other land actions that could be affected by the sale. We didn't find any issues. We determined it would be a competitive sale, and then set up a cost recovery account with the applicant. And this is for staff time to do the NEPA and the contract preparation. We did a fair market valuation, and I have it highlighted here because it actually was one of the longer steps. It requires concurrence from an outside agency, Department of Division of Mineral Evaluations. We did a NEPA review, and we were lucky here because an EA had already been done for this site. Actually, the whole parcel had been reviewed, and the expected reclamation would be a pit lake. So we got lucky in that case because we actually had a lot less disturbance associated with this request. And then I guess jumping down to 8 and 9 there, those are the steps that really set apart a competitive versus non-competitive sale. Everything else is the same on the BLM side. Putting the notice of sale in the newspaper, and then accepting sealed bids. And if someone other than the applicant had received the sealed bid, they would have to pay back the cost recovery, and then also provide an adequate mine and reclamation plan that the BLM would have to review with the NEPA as well. So a few extra steps there. So like I said, the operator is the applicant in our case, and we signed the contract with them in October of 2021. All right, so the next few slides are just talking about some of our interesting points from our NEPA and mine plan. But the EA for this, really a lot of it was talking about visual resources. There's a lot of concern of that from the public. And when we did our determination of NEPA adequacy, we found that there still is concern from specifically local government there. And so nothing had changed though as far as our visual resource management. And we actually talked to the local Benton City mayor about Recreation Public Purposes Act leases in the future post mining. And so that's been kind of an interesting way to think about future reclamation, like what would be the use, and if the local government's interested in it, that could be a potential for a park or open space. And through that process, we could even patent it over to them at some point. So other NEPA considerations, there are some sensitive species in the area. So we have a lot of stipulations with this contract, and they all kind of came from our NEPA or other regulations. But for the sensitive species, they have to do some surveys pre-ground disturbance, recreation, they have fencing and signs. And then, a lot of other considerations here. But overall, it was still a great site to do a minimum material sale. So that's what we've continued on with the process. Okay, so here are some screenshots of the pit over time. We have a mine plan that we received in order to do our NEPA review. And then after the successful bidder was determined, we did our final mine plan review. We do have a performance bond, which is essentially a reclamation cost estimate. So we needed to know what equipment they're going to have on site, what's the plan for reclamation, all of that. There have been a lot of plan modifications as we go, and there's been a lot of communication back and forth with the operator. Specifically, the overburden, which you can see here, is stockpiled along that northern property line. So I have a picture showing the overburden stockpile. This was a lot more material than they had originally anticipated. And so that was something we had to go back and forth on for both the performance bond and the mine plan. So our stipulations and ongoing work for this project lay out how they have to provide information on for production verification to the BLM. Specifically, they have to provide a pre-disposal topographic survey. It's kind of washed out here, but this was the pre-contract. And then each year they provide us another survey and the raw data that goes along with that. And we use that to determine if the production reports that we receive monthly are accurate. And the production reports are in tons, so we have a site-specific density calculation that we've been using. Some things that when we go out and do inspections, we're thinking about ongoing reclamation. How is this going to affect our surveys? Where are the stockpiles, the overburn stockpiles, swell factors, things like that. So that's ongoing. We do pretty frequent inspections out here. I use rangefinder to estimate volumes and distances and high wall heights, that sort of thing. I like having the photo points, especially nearby, since viewshed is important. And so again, this is just showing a couple spots off-site that we can have some photo points. All right, here's a picture of the pit in operation. So they're really only operating in the winter to reduce dust, and they have a mobile setup. This is a mobile hopper and crusher going onto the conveyor belt that has belt scales, and all the material leaving BLM is weighed, and then it goes onto their private side where it's processed. And then so the rest of the year, it's a pretty empty pit, nothing there. So I'm inspecting frequently enough to kind of know what's going on over the course of the year. Let's see, the only permanent features are the power line pole, electrical box down the corner there, and those may move around as their operations progress. Anything like trash on site or equipment broken down, and just have good communication with the operator. So I put together some considerations for potential operators for mineral material sites on BLM. We do have a process for exploration permits, and this is a great way to get an idea of what you're getting into before you request material. It does require some NEPA, but it's not as major. The extent of the surface disturbance over the life of the contract, we can modify plans after issue a contract, but if NEPA is required, further NEPA, that could really slow things down. So the BLM geologist can help with determining what needs to go into the NEPA review. And then establishing communication. Who is the best contact at the site manager or owner, and talking with the BLM constantly to see when a mine plan might need to be modified. Mineral material sales are discretionary, so performance does matter. Here are some publicly available resources for mineral material sales. We have the 3600 regulations, our handbook. E-planning is where we put all of our NEPA documents, so you can look up and see where mineral material sales have happened before and what the NEPA looked like. And then we do have the mineral and land record system, which is a way to look at an area even through a map viewer and see if there's been past or current authorized sales. So the takeaways I have are that there are BLM managed lands in Washington, and some of them have a lot of sand and gravel thanks to the Ice Age floods. Competitive sales shouldn't be avoided. They can be beneficial to all parties. And then there needs to be a lot of communication between the BLM and the operator to stay in compliance with environmental and mineral material disposal laws and regulations. And the BLM wants everyone to be successful because this program does make money. So I think that is it. Thank you.
Can you tell us how much the performance bond is and how you keep it up to date?
Mm-hmm. So right now it's 100,000, and really just modifying it as we go. Yeah, we are in discussions of a second contract, and that's going to really change the reclamation plan. So it could really change the performance bond as well. Yeah, and then we just kind of go back and forth with the operator on what their plan is over the next 3 years, sort of thing.
So you don't have a regular period for reviewing it, so like every year, every 5 years?
Well, I guess I'm thinking of other types of mining. It's every 3 years, but we've been reviewing it probably every 6 months just because of how many modifications we've had to the mine plan.
With all that gravel being processed, do they turn up any vertebrate fossils?
That's a good question. I haven't heard of that. Nearby, there are paleo resources, but I think those are mainly outside of uh, the flood deposit, the thick gravel flood deposits. A lot of the vertebrate fossils, maybe they would be churned up pretty bad in there, but to the south in Horse Heaven Hills, I've heard of some fossils down there for sure, some mammoths, that kind of thing.
Curious if you could speak to any overlap with state regulations, state permitting, oversight, inspections, bonding. Are there dual roles, or you kind of work in parallel with state agencies, or how does that work?
So for this type of mining, we don't have an agreement with the state, and so we're kind of working separately. But we do require that they follow all state and local regulations, and we have a contact with the state who we can reach out to, and they can reach out to us. So that's kind of how that's been going. Since they had their private pit first, I think a lot of their state permits, they could just expand the area. At least that was my understanding. Yeah.
I'm curious about the geologic content of these gravels. What mixture would you say is Precambrian belt cobbles from Montana and Idaho, and what percentage is basalt? I'd think that would go to the durability of
Yeah.
the product.
Yeah, definitely the older gravels are all the Precambrian belt because they are well-rounded, yeah, super durable material. And then as you move up section, you start to see more of the basalt-rich, dark sands. So a lot of the basalt has been turned into the sand size material. So I haven't seen a lot of basalt cobbles or larger on the site though.
So the Precambrian material is segregated stratigraphically?
It's the Precambrian material is mainly the gravel, and then the sand becomes more basalt rich as you move up. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about the time elapsed from sale to production. It looked like it was about 10 months. Is that right? From December 20 through
Yep.
the fall of 21?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we received the request in end of 2020, and we were lucky though, right? We already had the EA done, and then the contract was signed in 2021. It took a while for them to start moving the overburden, so they probably didn't start actually producing material till the next winter.
Well, that's really impressive. I guess the other question I have is just geologically, do you see imbrication of the gravel cobbles?
I guess I haven't looked at them that closely to notice that. Try to stay away from the high walls, right? But
Okay, thanks.
yeah. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Sir.